My name's Matt Ashby. I'm what's called the program convener for the BSc Crime and Security Science. So I'm responsible for coordinating the program and for speaking to people at open days and doing various other things. I'm also one of the lecturers on the program, so I lecture two of the modules that we have on the program. I'm going to start off by talking about the program that you've applied for, just to give you an outline of it. Once I've done that, then Lorenzo, who you can also see, who's one of my colleagues, he's going to give you a short taster session from his module on organised crime, which students take in the second or third year. And then and then we've got various other people who are going to speak to you after that. As I said before, if you've got questions at any time, you can submit those in the Q&A box. So thank you to the people who've submitted questions already, and I've answered those. And you can keep doing that at any time at all. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk to you about the program and just to give you a brief overview. I'm aware that you've applied for the program and so you already know something about it, but I'm also aware that that was probably several months ago, and so it's probably useful for us to go through this again quite briefly now. So the first question that I probably need to answer is, what do crime scientists do? So what is crime science? Well, we do quite a lot of different things. So these are some examples of projects that we are doing in the department now or have done over the past few years. So we have people, for example, who do things like work out how best to stop online fraud against older people. Which might be different from online fraud against you, for example, as a younger person. We've got a team, and Lorenzo is part of this team, in the Centre for Future Crime, where they look at all sorts of different things from different scientific disciplines to try to spot future crime problems before they happen. So that might be things like new technologies like AI that create new opportunities for crime. And if we can spot those as soon as possible, then we can try to work with the people building those new technologies to build them in a way that stops those crime problems. This is part of my work. So I work with some colleagues on looking at international human trafficking and the circumstances in which that's most likely to happen. And so we work with police and the National Crime Agency and other organizations to do that. Some of my colleagues do things like help design products that are harder to steal, or find the best ways to stop knife crime. That's something that we've done quite a bit over the past few years. Or predict where terrorist attacks are most likely to happen. So we have another team of colleagues who work a lot on different aspects of terrorism. Sorry. So how do we do that? Well, if you were to do a traditional criminology program, then you'd be focusing on questions related to crime and criminal justice and so on. And you'd be thinking about those through the lens of law and psychology and sociology on most criminology programs. Now, what crime science does is it's slightly different because it takes those ideas from those subjects, but also takes ideas from lots of other subjects as well. So we have academics in the department who come from an engineering background, or they're mathematicians, or economists, geographers, computer scientists, and so on. And so what our degree does, which is unusual, is it gives you ideas and a grounding in all of these sort of different disciplines. And so, for example, we take from computer science, we take, well, how can we code in ways that help us to deal with security problems, help us to analyze crime data, those sorts of things. And so all of our students, by the time they've finished, can program in two different languages. Some of them choose to do more languages on top of that. Uh, then, but we also introduce ideas from geography. So I teach a module called crime mapping, for example, as well as law and psychology and sociology. Um, so the structure of our program, it's a 3-year program, full time, and in each year you tend to do 8 modules. So 4 modules each in the first term and 4 modules in the second term. And then the third term is generally focused on doing assessments. So in the first year, you will do these 8 modules. And the idea of this first year is to get everybody up to speed, and everybody having the same level of knowledge of these core ideas. So when students come to us, some of them might have done psychology of crime, for example, in psychology A level. Or they might have done something related to crime and society in a sociology course at school. And so what we're doing in the first year is we're getting everybody up to speed on all of these different ideas, including qualitative and quantitative methods, for example, which often people haven't done before. And we teach each of these things from scratch. So we don't expect you to come with particular knowledge in programming, for example. We teach programming from the very basics, and then so that everybody can get up to the same level by the end of the year. In the second year, we've got some more compulsory modules, but we've also got some optional modules that allow you to customize the degree so that you can get the most out of it and you can get exactly what you want out of it. And you can see that 2 of those optional modules can also be a placement. And I'll talk about the work placement more in a bit, because that's a really important bit of the program. And then in the third year, there's some more compulsory modules, 3 more opportunities to take options from across the university. And then every student does a research project. And a lot of students really like the research project because they get to choose their own topic, and because they're doing some real world research on a topic they're interested in. And so and it takes them throughout the third year. And so that's something that students often enjoy quite a lot. There's lots of different optional modules that people can take. Now, this is subject to change because we sometimes change optional modules if a new option becomes necessary, we think. So quite a few of these modules, like simulation, for example, for research, have been developed over the past couple of years because we've identified that as something that students want to learn more about, or maybe will be helpful to them when they go and get a job. So we don't guarantee specific optional modules, but in advance, because they might have changed by the time you get to the second and third year. But these are some examples of the sorts of things that we have available as optional modules. And as well as these, we allow students to take any other module from across UCL that they're qualified to take and that is relevant to crime or security in some way, quite broadly, and that they meet the eligibility criteria for. Okay, so how do we teach? Well, we teach in quite a lot of different ways, because we know that that helps students learn more effectively. So we do have traditional university lectures. So this is where a member of staff who's an expert in a particular topic will be talking to you about that topic, introducing new ideas, and so on. But we also do seminars, tutorials, group work, and so on, that where we get students to do exercises where they're using those ideas, because we know if we just tell you an idea, it's not necessarily going to go in. But if we give you some problems to do with a particular idea and get you to use that idea to solve those problems, then you'll understand it on a much deeper level. And so almost every lecture is paired up with a tutorial to help you do that. We have quite a lot of problem-based learning. So particularly in the coding modules, so we might say, well, this particular police leader is asking for some analysis of this data to answer these questions, and you then go away and you analyze that data and you answer those questions. And that might be an individual task or it might be a group task. We do quite a lot of group work as well, because that's a really important skill for students to develop in order to go into good jobs in the future, is to be able to work well with other people. We have events where students are standing up and speaking. So this is a poster session from earlier this year, where students are presenting some work that they have done. And actually they're presenting it to staff, but also to some of our alumni who are there. So these two people are former students of ours who have now graduated. They work in security related jobs in security consultancy in the private sector for these guys, and they then come back to talk to our current students. So we also have careers events where people from different organizations come and talk to our students about what they need for the future. Now, actually, this presenter who now works for BAE Systems is also is also a graduate of ours. And then we have visits to various different places. So this is our current first year students standing outside the Metropolitan Police Training Centre in Hendon in North London, where they go and visit each year to learn about how science is used in policing, for example. So we've got these 4 modules each term. So you'll be taking 4 modules at a time. What does a typical week look like on one of those modules? Well, it varies across different modules because different modules are taught in different ways, because they're the best way to teach a particular module might be different. So you might start off by doing 2 hours of preparation for a lecture where you might be doing some reading or collecting some information, or doing some other sort of task. You then might have a 2-hour in-person lecture. And all of our lectures are in person. We don't do any online teaching, because we know from after the pandemic that students tell us they greatly prefer to have lectures in person. So we do that. You then might be spending some time writing up your lecture notes, preparing for the tutorial for that week. So we'll usually give you work to do ahead of the tutorial. Then you'll come to an in-person 1-hour tutorial, and then you might spend an hour writing up notes after the end of that tutorial. And bear in mind, you're doing this for 4 modules at the same time. So this is going to take you probably to about 35 hours a week of studying, both in taught sessions with members of staff, on your own, or working in groups. And then in the end of each module, or often partway through and then again at the end, we'll have an assessment. And these assessments aren't just essays and exams. We use lots of different types of assessments. So just to give some examples of that, this is one of our current second year students. What we do is every year we take students on the securities technologies module down to the Home Office in London, the Interior Ministry, the Security Ministry for England and Wales, and they present. What they do is they identify a new type of crime that has been enabled by development in technology, and they present the problem and they present suggested solutions, and staff from the Home Office, so policy experts and data analysts from the Home Office, come down and talk through, okay, well, yeah, that's a problem we know about and we're looking at that already, or well, that's a problem we haven't thought of. And so that's a really good opportunity for students to start to develop a professional network. We do quite a lot of presentations. So this is, again, current second year students winning this is the team that won the prize for producing the best presentation on this module, which was about how to prevent a particular crime problem that we gave them as an example. And so they all got a prize for coming first. And then there's also a module on the third year where students can choose to produce a YouTube video where they they identify a particular crime, a particular investigative technique that police use, and then they analyze the evidence on how effective that technique is. So in this case, CCTV, which has quite limited effectiveness in lots of cases, and that's important to for police to understand. And then they produce a video doing that. Now, the reason we do all these different types of assessments is that we want students to develop a really wide variety of skills that will help them to get the best jobs they can get in the future. And our students go on to do really good jobs. So the final bit of the course I haven't talked about is the work placements. So these are competitive, and about half of students each year will do a work placement. You do have to apply to do it and then to do an interview with the company involved. And when you're doing the work placements, that's not photocopying, that's not making cups of tea for people that work in that business. This is dealing with real world problems. So something like analyzing threatening letters sent to athletes, or doing some analysis to assess how effective domestic violence victim support is in a particular area, or working with urban planners to work out what the criminal risk is associated with building a new housing development. And these are all real world examples that the placement students have done over the past 2 or 3 years. So students really like the work placement because they go out to do to work in a company or a public sector organization like the police. And very often students go back and get a job at their work placement organization after they've graduated. That's something that we've seen this year, and we see every year basically. So the work placement is a really valuable feature of our degree, but to keep it valuable, we make sure that we're sending students who are going to do well and who the companies are going to want to have there, and that's why it's competitive. And these are just some examples of organizations that we've done work placements with over the past couple of years. So where do our graduates go next? Well, some of them go into generic graduates jobs, maybe working for consultancies like PwC, but a lot also go into specific specialist jobs where they've been given they're using the skills that they've learned on our program. So that could be for a police force, or for the security service, MI5 or something like that, or for government, or for specialist organizations like the Financial Conduct Authority. So that's a brief overview of the program, and we're going to go on to talk about various other things next. Just some reminders that you can get more details about the program and about us on the Perspectives website or on our departmental website. You can also look at our Instagram feed or any other social platform, our feed in any other social platform to find out more about what we're doing day to day. But if you've got any questions, please do put them in the meeting chat where we'll answer them. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to hand over to Lorenzo, one of my colleagues. He's an associate professor in the department. And so what he's going to do is briefly give you a taster of what one of our modules or one topic looks like in one of our modules. So thank you, Lorenzo. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm very excited about this. I want to showcase a bit what we do in the module. I hope you can all see the slide at the moment. So, short introduction about myself. I'm Lorenzo. I'm an associate professor at the department, but I'm also the deputy director of the Doe Center for Future Crime, which, as Matt explained to you today, investigates all the future developments of crime, particularly in relation to new technologies or even social changes such as climate change. So we investigate how crime will look like in the future, how crime will change in the future. My expertise is financial crime with a particular global perspective, and of course, organized crime, which I teach in the undergraduate and postgraduate courses. Now, what I want to do with you today is to give you a proper taster, as Matt said, of what it is to learn with us and to learn in our classroom. So the session today is going to be interactive. So I would ask some questions that I do expect you to answer, but they're not technical questions, because one of my approaches to teaching is to start off with what you already know about the problem, and to consider the preliminary, elements you might know about this problem, and then build further knowledge, build perhaps some theory. So today we're going to start with something very basic, such as what is organized crime, how we're going to study organized crime in this course. And to start off, I have initially some questions for you. So first of all, who is this person? I trust you can all see him. Can't see the chat while I'm sharing, but I'm sure that I can put that here. Please feel free to unmute yourself and let me know either in the chat or in...
Lorenzo, people can't
Yeah,
unmute themselves on
they can't
a
unmute
Zoom
themselves. All right.
webinar note. So I think it's probably best just to say who it is.
All right, great. Thank you, Matt, for this tip. Okay, you might have guessed what this is. This is Al Capone. Al Capone was a boss of organized crime racketeering group in Chicago in the 20s and in the 30s. And he's probably the most stereotypical figure of organized criminal, very close to what is then represented in movies, such as The Godfather, for instance, or in a more modernized version, The Sopranos, classic American Italian mafia group. But also we have another example here. This is a pirate, and particularly this is a portrait of Blackbeard, the pirate, otherwise known as Edward Teach. And you might say, well, what has this to do with organized crime? But actually pirates were more organized than you might expect. They had codes of conduct. They had rules whereby they would determine how to share the plunder. They had a strong hierarchy. For instance, Blackbeard himself was a captain. So you do have a proper organization behind piracy. This is not just a random group of criminals that joined ranks together. So it's a proper organization, but is, as you might imagine, a very different phenomenon from organized crime in the United States in the 30s. Here we have Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar, as many of you might know, was a boss of the Medellin cartel, who smuggled cocaine and other drugs in South America. Again, very different business, whereas Al Capone was selling alcohol in black markets and perhaps extorting money from local businesses. Pablo Escobar was actually organizing a much larger scale production of drugs and distribute them all around the world, taking advantage of Caribbean routes, of sailing routes and shipping routes. So again, yes, another type of organized crime, but an extremely different one from the two we saw before. And then to conclude, an even more different example, this is a representation of the outlaw motorcycle gangs. The most famous one is Hells Angels, and these are almost fraternity of people that join together, that associate with each other in order to find a shared sense of belonging, a spirit, a communal way of living, and they are declaredly, so they declare themselves outlaws, so they live outside the law. So they're, as all effects, criminals, and they're part of an organization, but as you can see, this is very different from Al Capone in the 30s or Blackbeard in the 18th century. So the reason why I presented you with so many contrasting, if you want, examples around the world and across history is because I want to make a clear point. It is impossible to provide a one unique, final, and universal definition of organized crime. This is something that many scholars agree with. Organized crime is so different, it's so diversified that we can't provide a unique definition. And then you might ask, why on earth do you have a course on organized crime if organized crime cannot be defined? The answer is that organized crime perhaps cannot be defined in a simple way, but we can unpack it in its main dimensions. So whatever the organized crime is, whether it is criminal syndicates in the 30s, whether it is pirate groups, or whether it is, the cocaine cartels in South America, whatever the geographical and temporal aspects of organized crime will be, and even aspects that we can't predict how organized crime will look in the future, perhaps entirely digital, whatever these characteristics, there are still some common core elements that maybe won't help us defining a proper universal definition, but they will help us unpacking the core features of each criminal group. So let's have a look. The first core element of any organized criminal group is activities. This means studying and understanding what do organized criminals do. How do they act? How do they relate to each other? How do they talk to each other? What kind of crimes they commit? All sorts of activities. The second element of organized crime is structures, which is basically how the relationships between criminals in an organized criminal group work. What are the relationships between criminals and their criminal group, or between different criminal groups? And the final core element of any organized criminal organization is governance. As we said before, and as we saw in the examples, organized crime presupposes a structured organization. And this begs the question of how is this organization governed, how it is controlled, how it is interfering as well with legal governance. So, in other words, governance concerns the way in which organized criminals use their power to control themselves, but also to control the legal world. So I think this is an introduction of what we're going to do. What we're going to do next is we're going to start unpacking these three core elements: activities, structures, and governance. I had to prepare some nice interactive slides, but since you are all muted, I will lead you through them myself. So let's have a look at activities. The first thing that comes to mind when one talks about organized criminal activities is the types of crimes. So if you look at Al Capone, you would say extortion. You could say illegal sale of alcohols in the black market, so smuggling, illegal trade, and so on and so forth. But studying the activities that make up organized crime means something more than that. It means going beyond the criminal acts or the criminal behaviors, and means checking also the steps that are required to perpetrate any crime, even before the crime is committed. So, for instance, the way in which criminals acquire the tools of the trade, or also how they interact with other networks and stakeholders. For instance, maybe before committing a crime, the criminals will try to secure the sympathy of the public, or before committing a crime, they will try to bribe the police in order to get impunity for that crime. So, studying the activities is not limited to the crime types that organized criminals perpetrate, but in general, any other activity that relates to those crimes. So to understand a bit more criminal activities, scholars came up with an idea, which is organized crime into scripts. We call these crime scripts because they resemble the script of a movie or of a play. So they're made with different scenes, and each scene of the script basically equates to a step that needs to be committed in order to finish off that crime. An example I have here of a crime script is car trafficking. Now, when you think about car trafficking, which basically means selling, exporting stolen cars, you can think of a different set of scenes, of stages that make up a script. It's properly like writing the scenes of a movie in order, just to make sense of a plot. The first scene would be to identify a vehicle that can be a target. So you might have different thieves around, different car thieves around the country or around the neighborhood, depending on how vast the organization is, that will scout for vehicles that are easy to steal, perhaps because they're in dark neighborhoods, then no one can see what's happening, or because maybe they're not in a garage, they're in an open space, they don't have any fences, they're easily accessible, or perhaps because they know that the owners will leave the doors open, and so on and so forth. So identifying the target vehicles. The second point would be to buy or acquire or get or make the necessary tools to steal the vehicle. This can be any technical tool, like bars to open the doors, rather than electrical tools to set up the engine, or now more technological tools to clone the key boxes of particular vehicles, and so on and so forth. So identifying the vehicles, making or procuring the tools, and then of course there is the act of stealing, which is the proper car theft crime. But after that comes the alteration or the changing or the modification of plates, for instance, or number plates, and then documents, all the falsification, the forgery of the documents to kind of conceal the illegal provenance of these vehicles and make them look legitimate. And after that, there will be the identification of possible countries where to export the stolen vehicles. Maybe this will entail looking how tight the controls in these countries, how strict the police are, and perhaps how watchful the judiciary is, or how tight the legislation is, how easy it is to export these goods, how favorable are shipping routes, and so on. And then after they identified where to export the stolen cars, they need to identify how to transport the stolen cars. So for instance, that means identify whether ships are more convenient, for instance, than planes or lorries. What is the best and the safest and less risky route to export these vehicles? And then, of course, arranging the effective shipping of these vehicles. So once they identify the right transportation, they need to find a kind of a shipper or a company or a black market organization that is willing to deliver these goods abroad. And then finally, once the goods have reached the destination, they need to contact someone that can arrange the sales for them. And this, again, can be someone in the black market, or can be through licit routes that are perhaps unaware of the provenance of the vehicles, thanks to number 4, that is the alteration of the documents and so on. So we don't need to go into details of car trafficking. What matters is that you get a gist of what it means to study the activities of a criminal group, of an organized group, which are not limited to just one crime itself, such as car theft, but they revolve around a number of other activities that can actually make up several crimes, such as, in this case, forgery of the documents or illegal trade, and so on. Now, that was it about activities. The second core element of any organized crime, as we said before, is the structures, which is what are the relationship between organized criminals. Now, it's very easy to fall into the trap, and that's because we are bombarded by media about it, of thinking that organized criminals are all like mafia-type organizations. There's a boss, there's a chain of command, and there are, high-ranked criminals and subordinates, and so on and so forth. But this is not the case. Criminal structures in organized crime can be the most variable. I can't give you here an entire list of all these structures, but I can give you a couple of ideas to organize your thoughts about it. So the first one is to think about structures in terms of forms. That is, how does the structure look like? Hierarchy is the more familiar one, the one that you think of when you think about the mafia. But we also have criminal groups that are arranged in networks. So they're not fixed relationships, they're stable relationships with people they know. So criminals will know each other for a long run, but they're not one on top of the other. They're not organized in a proper association. They're a network. Similarly, another form of criminal structure is a market, where people don't actually know each other. There's not even a network. It's a random and occasional interaction between a demand side of the market and a supply side of the market. So people who want to provide illegal goods, the sellers, and people who want to buy illegal goods, the buyers. And that's a market. That's not even a network, because there's no stable acquaintance between these contacts. And this is the forms. But there are also another way to there's also another way to think about structures, which is in terms of function. So what is the function of different criminal structures? And we will see that some structures, particularly mafia, seek to replace the government. So they're so infiltrated in the legal economy and in the legal governance that they seek to become an alternative to official governments. The mafia in Sicily actually provides services for society instead of the state. And that's why it's so difficult to eradicate, because the community is actually sympathizing with the mafia. But not all criminal organizations are like that. There are criminal organizations that have simply a business function, and we call these entrepreneurial structures. There are some criminal organizations that are exactly like a proper firm, like a company, and they have exactly the same function as a company. So doing business, making profits, and sharing dividends. And then there is another function of organized criminal structures, and this is associational. Some structures like the Hells Angels, the motorcycle gangs, actually do not pursue any kind of ambition of conquering the state or replacing the state, nor they have a profit in mind. They actually go together because they share some values. They want to share a sense of communal identity, common values. And these are, for instance, sects, groups that organize around a particular interest, like motorcycles and so on and so forth. In these cases, there might be no hierarchy, no profit-oriented vocation, but just the idea of getting together and do the same things together. That said, let's provide some examples. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Pink Panther, the character from the movies of the 60s and then the cartoons in the 70s. But the Pink Panthers is also the name of an organized criminal network. So in this case, we're not talking about a hierarchy, we're talking about a network of jewel thieves. So this is people that don't always know each other. They are in contact with each other, perhaps through intermediaries, which is international. So it's an international network. These thieves are scattered all around the world. As I say, there is no one in command. It's just a group of people that are in touch with each other, and they organize, they kind of take arrangements together to commit big jewel thefts around the world. So there is a very selective process to determine who are the best people in the network to perpetrate specific heists in museums, for instance, or in big jewelry shops around the major capitals in the world. And the heists they perpetrated are rather spectacular. But the funny thing is that much as they're very organized, they're not arranged, they're not organized and structured in a proper association. They're just a very free-flowing and open global network. A very different example that I want to provide you with today is Silk Road. This is an example of a structure which is complex because it is not a single structure like a market, a hierarchy, or a network, but it embeds elements of very different forms and functions of structures. So what is Silk Road? Silk Road was, now it has been closed down, is the first anonymous online black market. The market was available in the dark web, so you could access it only through the dark web. It used to host 10,000 products for sale. Most of these were illegal, and 70% of these products were drugs. 1 million accounts were subscribed to this platform. 1.2 million transactions were recorded during the span of its life, and the value of these transactions amounted to 183 million US dollars. So imagine eBay, but for illegal goods. This is a picture from an academic article of how Silk Road used to look like. As you can imagine, this is exactly eBay for drugs, eBay for illegal goods. You have on the right the categories. On top, you have a search bar that you can use to search the illegal products that you need, and even the pictures of the products, including pictures of the drugs being sold and the price. Now, I said that this is not a traditional kind of univocal, so one monolithic structure, but is a very complex, I would say, crossroads of different forms and different functions of structures. So on the one hand, clearly, this is a market, right? So this is a place where suppliers and buyers randomly meet and they seek to combine demand with offer. So classic market, but an illegal market, a black market. On the other hand, though, around this black market, communities started to form because there were proper community forums where people that were using the market and had an account could chat with each other, share interests, share practices. So from the market, a network developed. But also, if we look behind the market was run by a proper illegal firm. So a company that was not registered, of course, as a legal company, but had all the features of a company, headed by a young student, Ross Ulbricht, who basically created a sort of hierarchy below him and kind of managed to pay with the money that he was getting from this black market a proper organization. So it was employing staff, including admin staff, customer support, and so on and so forth. And this firm would get a share from the sales of this market. So it worked exactly like any other business company. Imagine Amazon, eBay, or any other online selling platform. The final thing we need to look at is governance. So how do criminals organize themselves and how do criminals seek to exercise power over the legitimate state? Now, we call this internal governance, so the governance of criminals themselves, and external governance, the governance that criminals seek to exercise with the legitimate economy. So let's have a look at internal governance through the example of American Cosa Nostra. This is a mafia-type organization that was exported from Italy to the United States at the beginning of the last century. Think about The Godfather, The Sopranos, Al Capone, and all these kind of stereotypes. So how is American Cosa Nostra is still active? So how is American Cosa Nostra organized internally? First of all, there are hierarchical structures based on families. So the organization is not one monolithic group, but is different families. Each family is run by one boss. So there is not one boss for the entire mafia organization. So Cosa Nostra doesn't have one big boss, but he has different families, each with their own boss. Underneath the boss, there is the underboss and an advisor. And underneath these two, there are the capos or captains, which are basically smaller bosses within the family. The last step in the hierarchy is ordinary members, which are called soldiers or buttons. Any members need the approval from their superiors before acting, before doing anything. So crimes, activities need to be approved by the superiors. The profits are shared with the superiors, but the superiors, in exchange of these profits, give protection to the lower ranks of the organization. And there is a system of extra-legal justice within the organization that seek to determine, what is right and what is wrong for these criminals and how to punish wrongdoing or misconduct within the organization and how to resolve disputes, how to resolve conflicts. So it is a proper organization with their own mini government, mini system of justice. Now, as I said, all these kind of governance seeks also to be exercised outside the boundaries of the organization on the legal state. There are many ways in which this can happen. First of all, the organized criminal groups seek to control illegal markets. So they try to control criminals that are outside the organization in order to remove and control competition. Secondly, they also try to control local legitimate business. So they don't only try to control their competition, but they also try to control legal businesses, for instance, through extortion or fees for service, which is called taxation in the sense of criminal taxation. They provide services or protection for local communities. As I mentioned, that's the example in Sicily. They have a system of intelligence gathering, for instance, to see what the police is doing or what other criminal groups are doing. And they also thrive on a system of reputation building. They want to be approved, appreciated by the local communities. They don't want to enter in conflict with the communities. And then, of course, a major way to infiltrate the legitimate state is the corruption of state authorities, bribery, undue influences, and so on and so forth. Violence, which is assumed perhaps to be a normal activity for organized criminal groups, is actually a last resort. Very well structured, organized criminal groups like mafias and similar groups don't actually want to use violence very much, because violence attracts bad press and attracts the law enforcement interest. So they rather avoid violence if they can, in order to maintain a positive image with the communities and avoid being investigated. Now, one other thing before concluding that we are going to do through the course is to assess what is not organized crime, despite it might look like organized crime. 3 examples. This guy is Bernie Madoff. He was one of the major financiers, I would say, in the United States until a few years ago. He was extremely famous for having streamlined investments through technologies. And he was so important and so famous in the finance scene in New York that he was actually a regulator. So he was invited by the state to help drafting the laws that ruled the financial markets. For whatever reason, because he was super rich, so he didn't really need that money, but for some reason he started kind of defrauding his partners and other customers of his firm. What he was doing basically is a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme is a scheme whereby a supposed investor like Bernie Madoff would ask you a lot of money, and you say, give me £1 million and I will invest them and I will return them with £5,000 more. Fine. And people was asking him, what were you investing them in? Oh, can't tell you, it's a secret. It's a professional secret. But he was not investing them. So he was just gathering money from a lot of people, pretending to invest them. And then he was paying back the first investors with the money that he received from the others. So eventually that creates a vicious circle, a loop, whereby you keep cashing money, but you don't have enough money to buy back everyone, because of course there is no investment. So the fraud, of course, exploded at one point. The FBI arrested him. He was convicted to spend 150 years in prison. And of course, he died after a couple of years. He was quite sick. Now, you might think this is organized crime because he was exploiting the firm that he had built, the legitimate firm. He used to exploit their reputation. He used to exploit the technologies and so on and so forth. But in fact, he was a solo actor. He was working on his own. No one knew, even his family, about what he was doing. So it can't really be considered an organized criminal group. Another example is, and this is commonly referred to as organized groups, is serial burglars. Say that there's a couple of crooks that decide to rob houses in a particular neighborhood in a serial way. Obviously, this requires some organization. They need to, plan. They need to do some steps in order to commit the burglaries, but there's no real governance. There's no real structure. That just a couple of accomplices that joined forces to commit ordinary crimes. So it's very tempting to say, oh, they're organized, therefore they're criminals. But as I said, organized crime implies much more than just, planning. That's not what organized crime is about. And to conclude with a funny note, as you can see, the press contributes to perhaps over-expanding the definition of organized crime, to be kind. So they like to see organized crime, what organized crime is not there. So this is a funny example of a reporter that says organized criminals are turning into dog theft amid a boom in demand for puppies. But actually, if you read what the police said in the county interested by these accidents, the police said there were just 4 incidents, 2 of which the suspects were known of the victim, and the dogs have been returned. So in fact, it was only 2 cases in which dog disappeared. So it's very difficult to talk of organized crime in these circumstances. But nevertheless, the media tend to exaggerate and to apply the label of organized crime to anything. That's something else we'll do in the course. We'll demystify what organized crime is actually not. I hope you enjoyed this taster. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to interact as much as I would. Anyway, I'm open to any thoughts, questions, and I'm very keen to interact with any of you today and later on if you want to get in touch. Thank you all.
Okay, so thank you very much, Lorenzo. And thank you to the people that have already asked questions, and we've answered some of those in the chat, and we're going to keep some of those to talk about later in the session. But the next person that we have is one of our colleagues from the student finance team, Kyle, who's going to talk through the questions about funding while you're at university and the different sources of funding that are available. So, Kyle, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Matt. So yeah, my name is Kyle. I'm one of the student funding advisors here at UCL, and my job is to support students throughout their time studying at UCL with any sort of questions or worries or concerns that you might have about money. And I also meet with offer holders and prospective students to talk through the funding that's available to students if they do choose to study at UCL. I'll try and keep this as quick as I can, but I'm going to talk through the funding that's available from student finance for our home students. That's generally UK students and students who are already resident in the UK. And then I'll talk through the funding that's available from UCL if you do choose to study here. That's available to all of our students, home students and international students. And then I'll take any questions at the end. So in this presentation, all the figures that I'm going to be talking through are specific. All the figures about student loans that I'll be talking through are specific to students who are currently living in England and are starting study in the 24-25 academic year. If there are any students here who live in other parts of the UK, then the figures will be slightly different. If you're from Scotland, the whole funding model is a bit different. If you're from Wales, it's a bit more generous than what students in England will get, so the figures will be slightly higher for you. And if you're from Northern Ireland, the figures are slightly lower. And just to talk through the terminology very quickly, obviously loans you have to repay, so you'll borrow the money and you'll repay it, and I'll talk through how the repayment works. Grants, you don't have to repay, so if you're eligible for a grant, you get to keep that money, you're not having to repay it. Bursaries are a type of grant where if you're eligible when you meet the criteria, then you're entitled to keep the money. And you should get the money. You shouldn't have to apply for it, and it's not competitive. If you're eligible for it, you'll get it. And scholarships are competitive. So scholarship is a type of grant, but you're competing against other students to receive a scholarship, and there'll be a set number available. There might be one scholarship available or 1,000 scholarships, but you're competing against other students to receive that scholarship. So now, going on to the funding available from student finance, when we talk about student loans, there are two types of loans that make up the funding that you'll be eligible to receive. The tuition fee loan to cover the cost of studying, and the maintenance loan to cover your living costs. And I'm going to start off by talking about the tuition fee loan. So tuition fees are £9,250 per year for every year that you're studying at UCL. And you can receive a tuition fee loan from student finance to cover the entirety of that cost. There aren't any upfront costs related to studying at UCL, so you won't have to pay a deposit or sort of self-fund the first installment if you're entitled to receive a tuition fee loan from student finance. And this loan isn't income assessed. So regardless of what your household income is, in most cases, if you're eligible to receive a tuition fee loan, you'll be eligible to receive the maximum amount, so the full 9,250. The money is paid directly to the university on the student's behalf. So it is up to the student to ensure that they've applied for their funding, that they've applied for the tuition fee loan, and that funding is in place before they begin their course in September. And then student finance will pay the university directly, and everything's just sort of just fall into place and go swimmingly from then on. And as I mentioned, it's not income assessed. So if you're eligible to receive the tuition fee loan, you should be eligible to receive the full amount. So the tuition fee loan is quite simple. The maintenance loan is a bit more complicated. So I'll spend a bit more time talking through that. So the maintenance loan is there for you to cover your day-to-day living costs. So your biggest cost is likely to be rent if you're living away from your parents. But it's also there for you to use on sort of socializing, household bills, groceries, traveling to and from campus, traveling to and from your parents' home on weekends or at the end of each term, course costs such as printing and things that aren't covered by the tuition fees, and clothes prescriptions and so on. The amount of maintenance loan that a student will be eligible to receive is based on a number of different factors. The main one is household income. So generally with the maintenance loan, the higher your household income, the lower the loan you'll get. And the lower your household income, the higher the loan you'll get to cover your day-to-day living costs. And where you live in term time also determines what scale you're sort of assessed against. So there's different scales for depending on where you're living in term time. And I'll expand on that in the next slide. You'll get a slightly lower.
Hi, Kyle. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think we can see your camera. I'm not sure if there's an issue with Zoom.
Sorry.
Oh, lovely. That's fine.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
For your year of study, in your final year of study, you'll receive a slightly lower loan, a slightly smaller amount than you will in the other years, because the academic year is slightly smaller, shorter, and you're not receiving funding to cover you through those the weeks of the summer break. And if you're eligible to receive any sort of state benefits, such as universal credit or personal independence payment, or any of the legacy state benefits, then you'll be entitled to receive a larger loan than other students, roughly about £1,400 higher. And that's if the student is eligible for those benefits in their own name, not if their parents are. And I'll expand on the independent student status as well. So if you're assessed as being an independent student, then your household income will automatically, in most cases, be considered to be zero, which would mean you'd be eligible for the maximum loan from student finance to support you with your living costs. So expanding on the point I mentioned earlier about your term time address, where you live in term time during any given academic year determines the amount of maintenance loan you'll be eligible to receive and the scale that you're assessed against. The highest rate of loan is for students who are living away from their parents and studying in London. So UCL would count as that. Any university within the 32 boroughs that make up Greater London. And then there's a slightly lower rate for students who are doing a year abroad as part of their course. And then a slightly lower rate again for students who are studying anywhere else in the UK and living away from their parents. And then the lowest rate of loan is for students who are living with their parents anywhere in the UK. And when student finance look at your household income, they're looking at your household income for the tax year 2 years prior to the academic year that the student will be studying in. So for the 24-25 academic year, student finance will be looking at your household income in the 22-23 tax year. If you have any questions about anything that I've mentioned, feel free to put them in the Q&A and I can address those afterwards. So this gives you an idea of how much is available for students. So this is an example of a student who is studying in the 24-25 academic year. They're living away from their parents and studying in London. So every student in that situation will be eligible for the bottom half of this triangle here on this diagram. So they'll all be eligible for a maintenance loan of at least £6,647. And if you have a household income at the higher end of the scale, and in this case, that's a household income of about 70,000, then you won't be eligible for any income assessed element on top of that base amount, the 6,600 there. If you have a household income that's £25,000 a year or under, then you'd be eligible for the full income assessed element of £6,701, in addition to the base of the pyramid that every student's eligible for of £6,600. So in this case, that would take the maintenance loan, the maximum maintenance loan, to £13,348. And again, if a student is eligible for benefits, state benefits in their own name, then they'll get a slightly higher amount. They get about £1,400 on top of this. And if you have a household income between that 70,000 maximum and the 25,000 minimum, then the amount that you receive will be somewhere between the minimum 6,600 and the maximum 13,300. So that just gives you an idea there. So the bit on top is based on your household income, but the base of the triangle here is what every student who's living in London and away from their parents will be eligible to receive. And these are the figures for students who are living with their parents in term time. So every student living with their parents in term time, regardless of their household income, will be eligible for at least 3,790. And that's the case if a student has a household income of £58,300 or more. And if a student has a household income of £25,000 or under, then they'll be eligible for an additional £4,820, taking their maximum maintenance loan, their total maintenance loan, to £8,610. And if a student's household income is between that maximum 58,300 and the minimum 25,000, then the amount they'll be eligible for will be between the minimum £3,790 maintenance loan and the maximum £8,610. The figures do go up every year. So every year that you're studying at UCL, the rate of loan you get will go up roughly in line with inflation each year, but the amount that you get in your final year will be slightly less because of the shorter academic year. So when student finance are looking at your household, you might be wondering who makes up your household. So it's basically parents and partners. So if a student lives with both parents, then student finance will be looking at the income of both of those parents for the relevant tax year. If a student lives with one parent, they'll be looking at just the one parent's income. If a student lives with one parent and their partner, regardless of whether they're married, whether they're considered a step parent, regardless of whether they financially contribute to the student's sort of day-to-day living costs, student finance will assess them as if they do, and will be looking at the parent and their parent and the parent's partner's income as part of the household income assessment. Any other adults that a student lives with, legal guardians who aren't a birth or adopted parent, carers, grandparents, adult siblings, their income isn't taken into account. So it's just the parents, and if relevant, the parent's partner. And the student's own income is assessed, but in most cases will be set to zero, unless the student has sort of unearned income from, like, if they have investments and other things like that, then student finance will look at that sort of income, but they won't look at income that comes from work. So part-time work, full-time work, savings, those sorts of things, they won't be looking at that sort of income. So in most cases, a student's own income will be set to zero. And a student can have their parents' income sort of disregarded as part of the household income assessment and just their own income looked at if they qualify for independent student status. So if any of these the criteria listed here apply to a student, then they can apply for or will automatically be granted independent student status. So then student finance will only look at their own income and their partner's income if a student is living with their partner. And in most cases, as I mentioned before, the student's own income will be assessed as zero. So like the tuition fee loan, the student is responsible for applying for the maintenance loan before the beginning of every year of study to ensure that they have the funding that they need to cover their day-to-day living costs. And all students are eligible for the minimum maintenance loan for their respective rate, which was the base of the triangle in the diagrams that I showed earlier. And if your household income has fallen by 15% or more since the assessed tax year, so the tax year 2 years previous, then you can apply to have your current year income assessed in place of that. So student finance will look at estimates of what you think you'll earn or what your parents think they'll earn in the current tax year, so the 24-25 tax year, and they'll award you your maintenance loan based on that. And then at the end of the tax year, this time next year, they'll then get in contact with you to look for actual figures of what your household did earn over that period of time. The maintenance loan, unlike the tuition fee loan, is paid directly to the student, and it's paid at the beginning of each term. So in September, January, and April. And in your first year, it might be the first installment might be slightly later. So you might be getting that around about October. And applications are currently open. If you haven't applied for your funding for the September 2024 start, then it's really important that you do that as soon as possible. The deadline for when student finance commit to ensuring all applications are completed and approved before the start of the academic year has passed. So if you're starting an application now, then the chances are that you won't get your funding, your full funding in place until October. But applications generally open around about February or March. Students will need to reapply ahead of every year of study to ensure that the funding is in place before they begin their studies. There's also additional funding available from student finance. These ones are all grants, so they're not loans and don't have to be repaid. The disabled students allowance is for students who have disabilities, where their disability means that they face additional costs or they require specialist equipment to support them with their ability to sort of study, to their ability to get onto campus and their ability to engage fully with their studies. It's very specific, the amounts that students receive, but generally student finance tend to cover the cost of things for you and provide you with the equipment or provide you with the support that you need, rather than in providing the student directly with the money. The adult dependence grant is for students who have adults who are financially dependent on them, where that adult has a very low household income. And travel grants are for students who are doing a placement or a year abroad as part of their course to cover the cost of traveling to and from campus or traveling to and from their placement. So these are all grants that don't have to be repaid like the student loans. So of course the student loans do have to be repaid, but they're not like any other kind of loan that you'll come across in your adult life. It's repaid a bit like an income tax. So it's repaid at a threshold of 9% on all earnings above £25,000. And I think the £25,000 has actually increased. I think it might be around about 25,800 now. So on any earnings above that threshold, students will repay their student loans at 9% for 40 years, and you begin to repay in the April after you complete your studies, but you won't in any case begin repaying any earlier than April 2028. Interest accrues at the rate of RPI, so there's no real terms cost to the loan, and repayments continue until you've repaid the full amount that you've borrowed or until the balance is wiped. And this table just gives you an idea of how repayments are made, or how much the repayments what the repayments look like based on what you might be earning. So if you're earning £25,000, you'd make no repayments. And if you were to get a job after you graduate earning roughly £30,000, about £2,500 per month before tax, you'd be making repayments of about £450 per year, which would equate to about £37.50 per month. So the amount that you repay is very manageable. It won't leave you in any sort of financial hardship. And it's completely linked to the amounts that you earn. So the more you earn, the faster you'll make repayments. And if you earn lower amounts, then you'll make lower repayments or no repayments at all. So who is eligible for funding from student finance? Generally, it's students who are settled in the UK and have lived in the UK for the full 3 years before the 1st of September of the year that they're beginning their course. So students who have indefinite leave to remain and EU settled or pre-settled status should meet this criteria. Students who have pre-settled status only if they've lived in the UK for 3 years or more, and all students who have settled status should meet that criteria automatically. Migrant workers and children of migrant workers should also meet the criteria if they meet the 3 years residency requirement. Students on the Afghan and Ukrainian scheme should be eligible, and they won't have to meet the 3 years residency criteria. So as long as you have that residency in the UK on the relevant Afghan or Ukraine scheme on the 1st of September 2024, then you'll be eligible to receive all the student funding. All the student finance funding that's available to you. And that's the same for students who have refugee status or humanitarian protection from the UK government. So now moving on to funding available from UCL. So this is for all of our home students. So again, this is mainly students that are eligible for student finance funding. The undergraduate bursary is our main sort of form of support for our students. This is for all home students who have a household income of under £42,875 as assessed by student finance. So when student finance assess your household income, they'll share the information with UCL and will automatically assess you for the undergraduate bursary. So everything will fall into place automatically, and we'll get in contact with you and we'll let you know if you're eligible, what you're going to receive and when you'll receive it. A bit like the maintenance loan, it's paid in 3 termly installments, so you'll get it in October, January and April, and it's a bursary, so it doesn't have to be repaid. And this table gives you an idea, or this graph gives you an idea of how much is available, with a maximum of £3,000 available per year, sliding down to £1,000, depending on where your household income falls. And you'll be assessed against this scale every year that you're here at UCL. We'll reassess you automatically every academic year, and you'll continue to receive this throughout your time studying at UCL, as long as you meet the criteria. And all students who are eligible for the undergraduate bursary are eligible for our long-term laptop loan scheme as well. These are bespoke laptops from HP, made for our students, and you'll get to keep this throughout your time studying at UCL. You just return it after you've completed your course in your final year. And the UCL accommodation bursary, unlike the others, which are paid as cash, this one is paid in the form of a discount on your first term's rent in first year, if you're living in UCL halls, with a maximum of £1,605 available as a discount on your first term's rent in first year. And based on Student Finance's criteria and assessment, there's additional bursaries available from UCL for students who are estranged from their parents or are care leavers, so have lived in the care of their local authority for a period of time spanning their 16th birthday. So that's an additional £1,000 available per year throughout your time here at UCL, in addition to all the other funding support that's available. And it's worth mentioning, if you are an estranged student or a care leaver student, in most cases, Student Finance will consider your household income to be zero, which means you'll get the maximum loan, you'll get the maximum undergraduate bursary from UCL of £3,000, and then you'll get the £1,000 estranged student or care leaver bursary on top. And we also have a wide range of scholarships available for all of our students to apply for. Applications for some of our scholarships have closed, and for others are approaching in June and July. And all of our scholarships are different. Application processes are different, and the amounts available are different. So if you haven't already, I'd recommend looking on Portico, on the applicant portal, and looking through the scholarships that are available for you to apply for. So one of our most popular scholarships as part of the undergraduate funding awards is the Malcolm Grant Undergraduate Scholarship, which offers a £25,000 award for UK students, and applications for this close in July. And for all of our scholarships, we're looking at financial need. So we're looking for students who have a household income of under £42,875. And a strong application. We're not looking at grades. If you get a place to study at UCL, a conditional or unconditional or conditional offer, then you've met our grade requirements. So we're just looking at financial need and the strength of your application as part of our scholarship process. And applications for our overseas scholarships for overseas students have passed, and students who have applied for our global undergraduate scholarship or any of our other overseas student scholarships have been contacted to let them know whether they've been shortlisted, and we're requesting evidence, or whether they've been unsuccessful. And we try to prioritize speed when it comes to our overseas applicants and scholarships for overseas students, so that students can push ahead with their visa applications. So our home students have until July, the early July, to apply for our scholarships, and students who've applied for our overseas scholarships should be hearing from us very shortly if they haven't already. Perfect. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Or if there's anything very specific to you, anything quite personal that you don't want to discuss here publicly, then feel free to email me and my team on studentfunding@ucl.ac.uk. Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Kyle. So we've answered quite a few questions in the chat already, but we wanted to give you specifically an opportunity to ask questions with some of our current students. So we've got two of our current students here today. Shiori is just finishing the second year of our program, and Phoebe is just finishing the final year, the third year of the program, and they're here specifically so that you can get get an idea of the sort of student perspective of studying on our course. So we did have a question in the chat. So from somebody who asked, I just wanted to ask about your experience as a student on the course. what's your favorite aspect of the course so far? How supportive of the environment in terms of academics, work, finance, health, etc. How difficult is the course according to you? So, Shiori or Phoebe, do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. So hi, I am a second year student of the course, and my favorite aspect of the course has to be the close proximity with the professors. As the department is quite small, I think that is one characteristic that is really special to this course. So the proximity with professors allows us to receive extensive support, and again, how the close proximity of professors and to your course mates, it allows us to kind of have a really nice environment for us to learn and to grow as a person. So not only academics. So I think that has to be my favorite aspect of the module. What about you, Phoebe?
Yeah, so on the part of the question about support available, so from UCL centrally, there's a lot of support about the sort of the finance side and health and all of that. And then the academic support from the department is also really good. So you have your personal tutor who you have regular meetings with every term, so you can always discuss your issues with them. Lecturers on all the modules tend to hold regular office hours, so if you need to book in to discuss any particular issues you have with the course content, you can, and they're always happy to answer questions whenever you have them. So yeah, I found the support to be really good. And also how difficult is the course? That probably depends a lot on the person. Everyone's going to find it different. Some people find certain modules harder than others, so that's probably quite hard to answer.
Yeah, so every year in my personal tutor meetings with first year students, I'll have one student come in and say, well, this module A is going really well, but module B I'm really struggling with. And the next student will come in and say, well, module B is going really well, but I'm struggling with module A. So it does vary very much for different students. But Phoebe, I don't think you said what your favorite aspect of the course was.
Oh yeah, so I think it's hard to like pinpoint one very specific part of the course, but I think my favorite sort of overall part was that it's very different to everything I did at school. All the A-levels that I did like had sort of no relevance to this course. It was very different. I wanted a complete change, and that's what I got from the course.
What A-levels did you do?
Maths, physics, further maths, and computer science.
Wow. Okay.
So some overlap with computer
Yeah.
science, a little bit.
Yeah, and even some of the maybe some of the maths, possibly not the further maths. Okay, so we're still very much open for questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. So if you just click on Q&A at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, you can ask questions there, and we'll answer them. The one of the things that somebody's asked about is the transition from school to university, and this is something that students often find difficult because being at university is very different to going to school. Shiori or Phoebe, do you want to say how you any tips for managing that transition?
Yeah. So so you're going to get a lot of free time. Well, not free time, but a lot more freedom over what you do and what you choose to do with your time. At first, it can be really difficult to manage, but I would advise to stick to a schedule to kind of make time for studying as well as going out and socializing. I understand. I was also first year as well. It can be very tempting to just go out all the time and explore London. But it is, I think the transition between school and university is that no one's going to chase you down to make you do your work and to attend these lectures. And so when you make that transition, it's very important that you stick to a schedule and or if you don't have a schedule, you make some time to, focus on uni. And I think that's what helped me.
Yeah, also during your first term, so up until Christmas of first year, you'll have an assigned transition mentor who is either a second or third year student on the course. So you'll be in a group with around 10 other first year students, and you have weekly meetings as a group with your transition mentor, and that's your chance to ask any questions or get any help from those people. And they can also, if it's a more serious problem, direct you to the right source of support.
Yeah, that's a good thing to remember. But yeah, studying at university is very different from studying at school, because at university you're in charge of your own learning. And if you take advantage of that, that can be really great, because it gives you lots of opportunities to do what you want to do, but it does put a lot of responsibility on you. And so we provide quite a lot of support, like the transition mentors in the first term, to help, and in the term one modules to help in the first year, to help people make that transition. So the next question we've got is, how's the social life at UCL? She already mentioned being in central London. So obviously having this amazing set of social opportunities in London. But was there anything else you wanted to say about
Yeah, social life at UCL, there are a lot of societies at UCL. UCL is home to a lot of societies. So there are a lot of cultural societies, sports societies, very niche societies as well. I have seen a lot of interesting societies,
that?
and
Some of them are extremely niche, aren't they?
yeah, I've seen Taylor Swift Society, I think Dog Appreciation Society, Bubble Tea Society, a lot of societies. And yeah, and regards to part-time work, I am an international student, so I do work within the 20 hours that I am given with my visa. And so I think if you make really good use of your time and you're able to manage your time wisely, I think that the module does give you time to work part-time. And so, yeah, there's a good balance if you are able to manage your time properly.
So, so one of the things about managing your own learning is a lot of times you're managing when you're studying as well. So if you want to do that writing up of your lecture notes on a Saturday because you're working on a Thursday, for example, we normally have one day a week where we don't have lectures, specifically so that students can do that. Then we don't mind if you work on a Saturday, if you're studying on a Saturday, as long as you get the work done. And that's the important thing. And that's about you managing your own time and us helping you develop the skills to do that. We don't have lectures or other taught sessions on Wednesday afternoons, and that's specifically to encourage students to be involved in sport. So some of our students are involved in playing for UCL teams, for example, or in more social sport opportunities. Phoebe, did you want to say anything about social life?
I was just going to add on the part-time job part of the question. Quite a high proportion of students do have a part-time job, but when you're looking for something, I'd say the more flexible it can be, the better, because there might be some weeks where you've got loads of time free, but then you get to the end of term and you've got essays and assessments to do, when you then maybe don't have quite so much time available for work. So if you can find something flexible, that would be sort of the ideal situation.
Yeah, I worked all the way through my undergrad degree, but they only worked because I worked for the Students' Union, and so they were really flexible. So yeah, finding an employer that can do that is important. We do sometimes have students who try to work too much, normally for financial reasons, and that then becomes a challenge. So there are rules about how much you can work, and we really do like people to stick within those. Okay, so next question is just a quick technical one. Does school end on the 13th of December as per the UCL website? So yeah, it varies each year, but that sounds about right. We wouldn't have any in-person sessions over the Christmas break, but you would usually be writing an essay or a report or preparing a presentation for a module maybe over the Christmas break, and that's also true of the Easter break. So we would we do need you to be, especially if we need you to be on campus from the last week in September through to the mid-December, and then from about the 8th of January through to the end of March, because that's when the talk sessions are, and all our talk sessions are in person because we know that's what students prefer. So we're still happy to answer any more questions that people have got. So what's the first week of uni like? Okay, so I think for internet, I don't manage it, so I'm not totally sure. But I think this varies depending on whether you're an international student or not, because I think international students come a week earlier. So, Shiori, do you remember back to your international orientation week, which I know was 2 years ago? And can you talk about that?
So I think one of the first things that you do, the first week of uni, you pick up your BRP, which I don't think they're using that anymore. They're phasing that out. But if they're still using it, you might pick out your
That's an ID, a government
ID card, yeah,
for international students.
And you might collect your student ID on campus as well. And also it depends on if you're staying in an accommodation. There might be a lot of opening, well, like kind of welcome days for international students, and so it does depend for international students and home students, but I think that it's roughly the same for international and home students.
Yeah, so the first week of term, so I'm a home student, so I wasn't here when I first started in that international induction week. But for me, the first term, it was a lot of inductions for the course, meeting your transition mentor, meeting your personal tutor, finding your way around campus, collecting your student ID, finding out where the library is. So you're not learning any content of the course in that first week. It's just a lot of introduction. So it can be quite a busy week, and social events. So getting to know people on your course, finding out about societies, social inductions for those, and that sort of thing.
There's a lot in that first week. So we'll, at the start of the week, at the start of induction week, we'll have some sessions to help you join, to introduce you to the course again, and to talk through admin to do with that, introduce you to your personal tutor, introduce you to your transition mentor. We then have a session at the end, towards the end of that week, that's specifically about how to learn at university and what's the best way to get the most out of your modules in that first week. That's something that we've introduced new this year. So actually, Shiori and Phoebe didn't do that. There's then at the end of the first week, there's the Clubs and Societies Fair, which is this enormous fair in one of the main buildings where all of the different clubs and societies have stands. So if you say you're from Malaysia and you want to go and join the Malaysian society, then you can go and do that because they'll have a stand there. Or if you want to play ultimate frisbee, I think there's an ultimate frisbee club. I think I've seen that around, the theatre or something like that. But basically the idea of that first week is to help you get settled in, find where everything is, meet your course mates, start to make some friends, because that's really important. So you've got people to talk to, people to work with, to do group work and so on. Although we mix groups up a lot to help you develop those, and then we also have and then that means that by the time we start the second week, which is when your lectures start, you're hopefully as well prepared as you can be for that. And if there's anything goes wrong at that point, you know who to speak to so that we can fix things quickly. Because sometimes things will go wrong. There will be issues, maybe accommodation or something like that, or visas and so on. And always the quicker we can fix those issues, the better. And so a lot of the first week is helping deal with any common issues, but also making sure that you've got a bit of a support network around you by the end of that first week. So that's we put a lot of effort into helping that people make that transition in the first week. So if anyone has any more questions, then they're very welcome to answer them, to ask them in the chat. You can also go, I'm just going to post the if you go to the course page on the website, which I'm just going to put in the meeting chat, then that will be there's a link there for you to ask questions, and you can ask questions of our teaching and learning admin team, and then they'll either answer them or they'll let me know and I'll get back to you. We're very happy to answer questions anytime between now and the start of the program. One question that people did ask in the when we did this we did an in-person version of this session last week was is there some reading that people can do over the summer, and we will send you, if you've accepted the offer, then we'll send you a list of things that you can do over the summer to get you started. If there are any parents on the call, I would like you over the summer, please, to teach your kids to live on their own, cook, clean, wash their clothes, that sort of thing. If students, it sounds silly, but if students can do those sorts of things when they arrive, it's one less thing they have to learn to do while they're also getting to grips with a new city and a new course and so on. So it looks like we haven't got any more questions. So you can ask questions via that link that I've sent. But I just want to say thank you again for your time. And if there's anything else you want to follow up with later, then please do. And I look forward to seeing you in the course at the end of September. But thank you very much.